Henry VIII was rotting from the inside. His court pretended not to notice the story nobody tells. These are the same person. On the left, a king so physically impressive that foreign ambassadors wrote home comparing him to a Greek god. 6 feet 2 inches tall, a 32-inch waist. An athlete, a musician, a scholar. The most celebrated monarch in Europe. On the right, a man who needed a mechanical device to lift him up staircases. A 52-inch waist, nearly 400 pounds. Legs so infected his physicians refused to enter the same room without covering their faces. Most people know Henry VIII as the king with 6 wives. The executions, the break with Rome. That story has been told 1,000 times. This is the story nobody tells. The one written in his own body. The one his court spent the last decade of his reign pretending they couldn't see. In 1509, Henry VIII ascended the English throne at 17 years old. His contemporaries ran out of words trying to describe him. Thomas More, a man not known for flattery, called him an extraordinary man. The Venetian ambassador wrote that Henry was the handsomest potentate I ever set eyes on. He spoke 4 languages. He composed music. He played the lute and the organ. He wrote theological treatises that earned him the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope himself. And he was an athlete of genuine ability. Jousting, wrestling, tennis, hunting. He competed daily. He won regularly. His armor from his 20s tells the story in measurements. A 32-inch waist, a 39-inch chest. Built like the warrior kings he admired in the history books he devoured. In 1520, he staged the Field of the Cloth of Gold, an entire temporary city of gold-covered tents, erected in northern France to meet the King of France. 3 weeks of feasting, tournaments, and spectacle, designed to announce to all of Europe, this is what England's king looks like. Confident, dominant, untouchable. He was 30 years old. He had 17 years left before everything changed. January 24th, 1536. Greenwich Palace. Henry VIII was 44 years old. He was still jousting. This alone should tell you something. Most nights his age had retired from the sport. Jousting at 44, in full armor, on a horse weighing 1,200 pounds, was not caution, it was statement. The lance caught him. He fell. The horse, all 1,200 pounds of it, came down on top of him. Henry VIII lay unconscious for 2 hours. His court panicked. Messengers were held at the palace gates. No news was allowed to leave until the physicians could determine whether the King of England was going to survive. He survived. Officially, the court declared it a minor incident. Henry himself refused to acknowledge any lasting damage. But 2 things happened in the days that followed that the official record cannot explain away. First, Anne Boleyn, 6 months pregnant with what was almost certainly a son, miscarried within days of learning about the accident. The shock, her ladies said, the terror of losing him. Henry's response was not grief. It was fury. By May, 4 months after the accident, Anne Boleyn was executed. Second, Henry's leg, which had carried a minor ulcer for years, stopped healing. It would never heal again. Modern physicians, looking at the historical record, have reached a clinical consensus on what happened to Henry VIII leg. The jousting accident almost certainly caused osteomyelitis, a deep bone infection that releases a constant stream of bacteria directly into the bloodstream. There is no clean way to describe what osteomyelitis does to a human body. The wound weeps constantly. The surrounding tissue dies in layers. The smell is distinctive enough that Henry's physicians men professionally trained to examine bodies in states of extreme decay, recorded their reluctance to approach him directly. His courtiers learned to breathe through their mouths when standing within 6 feet of the king. Henry's household accounts show the volumes of linen used to dress his leg wounds. Dozens of bandages changed daily. Special chairs built to elevate the leg. Mechanical hoists installed in multiple palaces. Because the pain made staircases impossible, the treatments his physicians applied made everything worse. The primary ointment used on his ulcers, recorded in the British Library manuscript Sloane, MS 1047, contained lead compounds, applied to open wounds daily for years. Lead absorbs directly through broken skin into the bloodstream. Lead poisoning causes aggression, paranoia, erratic decision-making, the inability to trust anyone. His doctors were treating his leg and poisoning his mind simultaneously for years, and nobody understood what was happening. By 1540, the armor his craftsmen made him recorded a 52-inch waist. That is not the most disturbing measurement from his final years. That comes later. Here is the part of this story that history never quite confronts directly. Everyone knew. His physicians knew. His courtiers knew. His wives knew. His ambassadors knew. Foreign courts received detailed reports about the state of Henry's body, his mobility, his smell, his moods, written by spies stationed inside the palace. And nobody said a single word to him. Not because they were afraid of execution, although they were, because the entire machinery of Tudor power depended on the fiction that Henry VIII was still the golden athletic king of 1509. When Henry entered a room, everyone present was required to behave as though the man being carried in on a chair was the same man who had once wrestled the King of France. In front of 10,000 witnesses, the portraits commissioned during his final years show a man standing straight, broad-shouldered, commanding, immovable. The painter Hans Holbein perfected a formula. Legs planted wide, chin raised, gaze level. That communicated dominance so effectively that the image became the template for how we picture kingship. 500 years later, that pose was chosen precisely because Henry could no longer stand that way without assistance. In his 20s, Henry VIII executed approximately 12 people. Many historians consider even that number generous toward him. In his 30s, the decade of the divorce, the break with Rome, the number climbed into the hundreds. In his 40s, after the jousting accident after the leg, the number reached 72,000. 72,000 executions in a kingdom of roughly 3 million people. Sir Thomas More, his closest friend and the man he'd once called the person I love best in the world, beheaded. Thomas Cromwell, the architect of his entire administration, executed on charges that even Henry's supporters privately acknowledged were fabricated. 2 of his 6 wives executed. The pattern is not subtle. Something happened to Henry VIII's ability to trust people. Something happened to his capacity for mercy. Was it the traumatic brain injury from the jousting accident? Modern neurologists think it's plausible. 2 hours of unconsciousness from a significant head impact can cause lasting frontal lobe damage, affecting impulse control and emotional regulation. Was it the lead in his bloodstream, absorbed daily through open wounds for a decade? The psychiatric profile matches precisely. Was it the chronic pain, years of unrelenting infection and inflammation, with no effective treatment and no relief? The honest answer, probably all 3, compounding each other. multiplying the damage daily. The most feared king in Europe was being dismantled from the inside by his own body, his own treatments, and his own crown. And every person in his court was required to pretend otherwise. By January 1547, Henry VIII was 55 years old. His physicians knew he was dying. Under Tudor law, predicting the death of the king was classified as treason, so they said nothing. On January 28, 1547, as the infection from his leg finally overwhelmed what remained of his immune system, Henry VIII died at Whitehall Palace. His body was transported to Windsor for burial. During the journey, the coffin reportedly split. Contemporary accounts describe dogs licking something from the floor beneath it. The official cause of death listed by his physicians: natural causes. The man who had remade England in his own image, who had broken from Rome, dissolved the monasteries, executed a Lord Chancellor and 2 queens, died rotting quietly in a room full of people who were legally forbidden from acknowledging what was happening. Henry VIII spent his entire reign building the image of a man who could not be touched. The portraits, the armor, the executions, every instrument of power aimed at the same target: the idea that England's king was above the ordinary failures of the human body. His body ignored all of it. The leg that never healed, the wound that poisoned his blood, the lead in his treatments that rewired his personality, the brain injury nobody was allowed to acknowledge. He didn't fall to a rival king. He didn't lose a war. He didn't run out of money. He was undone by a single afternoon in a jousting yard in January 1536, and by the system that surrounded him afterward. A court so terrified of his anger that not one person in his inner circle was willing to tell him the truth about what was happening to his body. Power doesn't protect you from yourself, and surrounding yourself with people who fear you guarantees that no one will ever try. Next week, Commodus, the Roman emperor who renamed the city of Rome after himself, fought as a gladiator in the arena, declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules. The film got it half right. The truth was considerably stranger. That story is already uploaded. Link below.